So what could Canadians watch you do in the first months of your administration that would help reassure them that this is going to happen?
This is real. Well, first of all, I'm going to axe the carbon tax. It's been kind of an epic commitment that I've made. It's iconic. And so I have to follow through on it immediately. And that will signal to the country that I'm serious. Second, we want to get rid of the GST on new homes and pass changes that aggressively incentivize municipalities to get the building started. That has to happen immediately for people to notice any difference in the cost of housing by the time I get through my 4th year. We will have rapid introduction of the biggest crackdown on crime in Canadian history. A massive crackdown.
And what will that look like, a crackdown on crime?
Basically, habitual offenders will not get out of jail anymore.
Right. 1% of the criminals commit 65% of the crimes.
Is that right?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Well, criminals specialize just like everyone else, right? And the best predictor of offense in the future is repeat offense in the past.
Right.
So
in Vancouver, they had to arrest the same 40 offenders 6,000 times in 1 year.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly a consequence of that specialization.
When we did this last time in the Harper government, we actually reduced crime by 25%. But interesting, this is a very big surprise. Incarcerations went down because the people that we kept in prison were in and out anyway. It was like the Hotel California. They were checking out, but they were never really leaving. So we had to basically save them a bed. But secondly, the small-time offenders were actually deterred. You know, all of the so-called experts say deterrents don't work. No, they do work.
Yeah, the best deterrent turns out to be probability of conviction rather than length of sentence.
And right now, though, it's worse than that. Even if you have a probability of conviction, there's a certainty that there won't be any real penalty.
Right.
So it doesn't
that's not
matter.
a real conviction.
That's not a real conviction. There's going to be a very serious crackdown on crime.
Immigration? What's the scoop there?
Oh, we have to slow down the numbers. There's no doubt about it. We have to end the fraud in the international student and the temporary foreign worker program. We have to...
Well, Canada historically had a very effective immigration policy.
We just have to get back to the best system in the world, which we had for 150 years. Even in the United States, both Democrats and Republicans used to say, they'd get up at a microphone and claim they were going to replicate our system because it was an undeniable success. Immigration was not even controversial before Justin Trudeau because it was so well managed here for so long. And we just need to get back to that system.
It was clearly viewed as a net benefit by the immigrants and by Canadians.
Absolutely. In fact, the support for immigration was strongest in kind of the rural, resource, and agricultural communities where the labor was most needed and welcomed. And people integrated. They arrived here, and we said to people, look, bring your traditions and culture and your stories, but leave the problems at the door. And this is, by the way, a history for Canada that goes back hundreds of years. I mean, the Protestants and Catholics were ripping each other's eyeballs out in Europe for centuries. And then they came to Canada and they got along. They ultimately ended up intermarrying and integrating completely. And, whether you were an Orangeman or a Catholic, Irish Catholic, you over time, you got along with your neighbor. And, in the last 9 years, we've seen that's come apart. The foreign conflicts are now spilling onto our streets. I want to put an end to that. I want to say, look, we're not interested in the world's ethno-cultural conflicts. We welcome people.
Shadow side of multiculturalism.
We welcome the people who come from places that have been afflicted by war, as long as they leave the war behind. And frankly, most people come here to get away from those things. So by getting back to a common sense of values and identity and reminding people that when they get here, they are Canadian first, Canada first. Leave the hyphens. We don't need to be a hyphenated society. We need to be...
So we can abandon the post-nationalist state rhetoric and presume that Canada does have a Western identity founded on the a priori principles of Western democracies, and
That's
that
right.
is a uniting ethos for the people that come here. Right.
And that we owe a debt of gratitude to the giants who came before us, who fought in wars, who laid down a parliamentary democracy, and who left us behind this incredible inheritance. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be grateful again, and we're going to inculcate the values of gratitude for our incredible history. Build up the country, celebrate what we have in common rather than obsessing about what divides us, focusing on the shared values that make us all Canadian. And I think in so doing, we can, and by the way, put aside race, this obsession with race that wokeism has reinserted.
Well, invented in
many ways.
When I moved to Toronto, it was as race blind as any country, as any city could be.
Right.
Right. And that's flipped. And it's flipped because of that obsessive concern with race. Right. That was something we 100% did not need in Canada. No. Right. We basically, what would you say, imported and invented racism in Canada. Right. As a consequence of policy.
Wokeism seeks to divide people into these different groups and subgroups, and we see the results in a 250% increase in hate crimes. But we're going to get back to the basic principle that people are judged based on their individual character and humanity rather than by their group identity. And that is actually, ironically, the most unifying thing we can do to bring our country back together. And as Lincoln put it, to bind up the nation's wounds.